For more than a decade, the Gilgo beach murders were one of the most chilling cold cases in New York history. Today, we're not starting on the beach. We're starting with a laptop and a document that reveals the meticulous, terrifying mind of a killer who was hiding in plain sight, a man whose double life would finally come crashing down, all thanks to some burner phones, a pizza crust, and a deeply corrupt police department.
Okay, let's dive right in. So in 2024, investigators are digging through a mountain of electronics, over 350 devices, seized from an architect named Rex Heuermann, and they find it, a Microsoft Word document. The title? HK 2002-04. It wasn't just a file, it was a methodical, step-by-step plan for murder.
And this was no building schematic, not even close. The very first section was just one word: problems. It was a cold, calculated checklist of all the obstacles he'd have to overcome. You know, things like leaving behind DNA, tire marks, or dealing with potential witnesses. The next section was just as clinical: supplies. This was basically his toolkit for terror, listing out everything he'd need: tarps, cutting tools, rope, bags, all of it. And then you get to the most chilling category of all. A section that laid out exactly what he planned to do after the kill. A section titled Body Prep. And under that body prep heading, there was a single, terrifying instruction: remove head and hands. This wasn't some dark fantasy. It was a cold, calculated plan, found on the computer of a successful Manhattan architect. And it would be the key to finally connecting the dots in a case that had haunted investigators for years. So, to really understand why that document is such a bombshell, we have to go back, all the way back to the beginning. Back to a desolate stretch of road on Long Island where the search for one missing woman accidentally uncovered a serial killer's graveyard. This whole nightmare really kicks off in May of 2010 with the disappearance of Shannan Gilbert. But it wasn't until 7 months later, in December, that a police canine unit out there looking for her stumbled on the remains of another woman entirely, Melissa Barthelemy. Within just a few days, they found 3 more bodies, all wrapped in burlap, all dumped within 500 feet of each other. They became known as the Gilgo 4. But the horror, it was just getting started. By the spring of 2011, the search had unearthed a staggering total of 11 sets of human remains. 11. That included a toddler and an unidentified Asian male. A quiet Long Island shore had revealed a secret that was truly monstrous.
So with all these victims, all this evidence, you have to ask the big question, right? Why on earth did this case go completely stagnant for more than a decade?
Well, the system was broken. I mean, completely broken. Sources talk about a profound level of corruption inside the Suffolk County Police Department. Get this, the former police chief, a guy named Jimmy Burke, actively blocked the FBI from helping with the investigation for years. He even allegedly dismissed the victims as misdemeanor murders. Now, Burke later went to federal prison for other crimes, but the damage was done. It wasn't until a brand new task force was formed in 2022 that things finally changed, and they changed fast.
So, with the old guard gone, this new task force comes in with fresh eyes and, crucially, full cooperation between agencies. They start re-examining evidence that had just been sitting in files for years, and it took them only 6 weeks to zero in on a suspect.
And you're not going to believe what finally cracked the case. It wasn't some brand new piece of evidence. It was a tip that had been sitting in the case files since 2010. A roommate of one of the victims, Amber Costello, had given police this incredibly detailed description of a client she called Frankenstein-like and his truck, a first-gen Chevy Avalanche. For 12 years, that tip just sat there, until the new task force finally connected that truck to its registered owner, Rex Heuermann.
So once they had his name, investigators started pulling on that thread, and Heuermann's digital footprint was just massive. He was using burner phones to contact victims, sure, but the billing records for his personal cell phone put him at the very same cell towers at the exact same times. He used an alias, Andrew Roberts, and an AOL email to arrange sexual activity. And maybe most telling of all, he was obsessively searching for news and updates on the Gilgo Beach investigation itself.
The physical evidence was just as damning. In 2023, an FBI surveillance team literally grabbed a pizza box that Heuermann tossed in a trash can in Manhattan. And the DNA they pulled from a leftover crust, It was a mitochondrial match to a hair that was found on the burlap sack used to wrap Megan Waterman's body, a direct physical link to one of the victims.
And that brings us right back to the blueprint, the murder document on his computer that tied everything together. In a section they think stands for dump site, it listed DS1, MILRD. That is the exact location where some of the remains of victim Valerie Mack had been discovered way back in 2000.
The document was just filled with these chilling little notes. Under a section they believe was for his target, there's a note that just says, "Small is good." It's likely a reference to his preference for petite victims, since most of the women he's accused of killing were 5 feet tall or even shorter. He even kept what investigators call souvenirs, old news articles about the murders, stashed away in his home and his office.
So, with this absolute mountain of evidence, where does the case stand today? Well, Heuermann is behind bars, and he's awaiting what's going to be one of the most high-profile trials we've seen in a long time.
All right, so here's the breakdown. As of early 2026, Rex Heuermann is charged with 7 murders. That includes the Gilgo 4, plus 3 other women whose cases had been cold for years. He has pleaded not guilty to every single charge. His defense team tried to get that key DNA evidence tossed out, but the judge ruled it's admissible. And prosecutors have been crystal clear. A plea deal is completely off the table.
But you know, as this case moves toward trial, it's so important to look beyond the monster, beyond all the legal details, and really focus on the human cost. Not just of the crimes themselves, but of the systemic failures that let a killer get away with it for so long.
There's a quote from a review of the Netflix docuseries Lost Girls that really just hits the nail on the head. It says, "True crime should ideally center around the victims. For way too long, this story was all about the mystery of the killer, while the victims themselves were often just reduced to a single, dehumanizing label."
And that's the simple, tragic fact here. These women were victims twice. First, at the hands of their killer, and second, by a system that totally devalued their lives. Because many of them were sex workers, their disappearances just weren't taken seriously. And as the sources make painfully clear, that indifference, combined with outright police corruption, just prolonged the agony for their families for over a decade.
They were mothers. They were daughters, sisters, and friends, and their names deserve to be remembered. Sandra Costilla, Maureen Brainard-Barnes, Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, Amber Costello, Jessica Taylor, and Valerie Mack.
The fact that there's been progress in this case is a huge testament to the new task force and to the advocates who refuse to let these women be forgotten. But it leaves all of us with a haunting question, one that goes way beyond Gilgo Beach. How many other voices have been disregarded, and how many other cases are still unsolved simply because of who the victims were?